Sally has a practice in both Fairfield and Iowa City, and she's going to speak tonight about emotional and stress eating, and she's okay with questions during and after. So here you go.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me come and speak to you. Emotional and stress eating is a topic that is a big challenge for a lot of us, I know, and it's something that I've dealt with. I spent about a year when I was 30 focusing on this issue, and not the whole year, but I was really looking at the meanings that eating had for me, and I realized it was a source of pleasure and excitement and nurturing, and it was just way too important in my life. So through following some of the suggestions that I gave you on your handout, I really looked deeply at what were some of the core meanings that food had for me. And it really broke a cycle of addictive eating, and I was really pleased that it shifted it to be less important, and while I still would enjoy food, it more is in the category of eating for health and fuel, and still enjoying it, but not having it be so important in my life. So I want to, when I was asked to do this, I thought, well, I'll do a little more research and see what's happening currently, and I really appreciate finding out a lot of the scientific research that's come out now, especially on the brain, is very exciting and really gives us some insight into why some of these things are so hard to accomplish. Rationally we think, well, we know what to do. We're all pretty much experts on dieting by now, but it's so hard to do some of this stuff, and the research on the brain is shedding some light on why that's the case. So before we get started, one of the ways I work with people is to teach some techniques that can help you handle stress and emotion. And so I want to teach you a breathing technique now. So I'd like you to close your eyes. And what we're going to do is visualize breathing in the color blue. And that's a very calming color, and have that go through the whole body. And then when you breathe out, I'd like you to breathe out the color red. And if you feel comfortable, and especially when you're by yourself, when you breathe out the red, you can make a noise. I usually sound like Darth Vader. And so let's do a few of those breaths. So breathe in the beautiful color blue, and then breathing out the red. Just kind of letting it go. So let's do 2 more of those breaths. And when you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes. So a couple of years after working on my own emotional eating, I created a dessert business that was here for 10 years. So I decided to test this out to see if I really was able to control this. And I told my husband that we couldn't really gain weight because it would be bad for advertising. And also we'd be eating up the profits. So we really had to keep that under control, and that worked out pretty well. So the name of my business was Truffles and Cream. In working with people, I've noticed that a lot of us have parts that really believe that what it means to live in a free country is that we should be free to eat anything we want at any time we want with no consequences. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, but it's pretty hard to give up certain things that are near and dear to us in the food category. Tonight I want to focus on why it's so hard to do what we know will help us in this area. And as I said, the brain has become one of the new frontiers for science, and what's being discovered now is just, it's fascinating. Emotional eating in response to stress, sometimes it's like we're a careening vehicle. I got this image today, a careening out of control vehicle. It's set in motion by a stressful situation, and so we have this stress response, and cortisol and other stress hormones steer us towards food that we find comforting, nurturing, or a source of pleasure. Although we know many other things that we could do that are pleasurable, often food is our number one choice. It's very easy, it's available, it's there, and it's familiar. So added to this, they found that stress hormones really weaken the rational voice of the frontal cortex. The frontal cortex is the area of our brain, the just say no area of the brain. So we really need that to be in executive control to kind of steer our food choices. And if that's weakened by stress, then we're more vulnerable to eating things that we wish we wouldn't have later. For most of history, the biggest challenge was avoiding starvation. So our bodies were designed to keep weight on, not take it off. So we're trying to work against our history here. When we're stressed, when we perceive danger or shortage, our brains activate physiological reactions that drive us to seek and consume rich food. And then stress hormones will cause us to add to our fat reserves, just so we have some emergency fat supplies if we need them. Repeated yo-yo dieting changes the landscape of the brain into what Ronald Reuben describes as the craving brain. And he has a book by that name. According to Reuben, repeated dieting is perceived as starvation by the mind-body, which responds with psychological and physical changes that create the craving brain. The craving brain drives a person to be hyper-responsive to the hunger impulse, unconsciously fearful of another famine. And that's the reason it gets harder and harder. Every time you lose weight and gain it back, it gets harder to lose it that next time because the craving brain is operating. Conscious logic tells us to diet, while unconscious biologic screams at us to resist at all costs. This is dangerous. It's seen as what's going to happen. Scientists are discovering that adults' brains have more plasticity than was once thought, giving hope that we can make brain changes, including changing the craving brain to a more peaceful one. They've found that changing the craving brain requires the development of a self-observation stance, paying gentle attention to our thoughts and the messages that we give ourselves. Doing this can restructure our neuroanatomy. So just to illustrate how this works, they did a study with people who have obsessive compulsive disorder, and one of they're compelled to do repeated activities such as hand washing. And so what they did in this study was take a brain scan of the person's brain and show them that the area of fear response area of the brain was very active. It's almost like they're little tiny power plants flashing energy in that area of the brain. And then the instruction was, when they had the desire to wash their hands, that they were to look at this brain scan and they were to say to themselves, let's see, where is this here? It feels like I should wash my hands, but it's really just a short circuit in my brain. Instructed to do something else for 15 minutes, like gardening or walking, something that would be different than what their desire was. And what they found was that the more these people challenged this habitual reaction, the more their urges and their anxiety dropped. And follow-up scans of the brain showed that the structure of their OCD brains had actually changed over time with interrupting this pattern. So many researchers like this one are showing we can alter the physical configuration of our brains by observing impulses closely and calmly, but not obeying them. So it's like we're on to ourselves more. We realize, hey, we've got the impulse to do this. but we stop ourselves and observe it. The way to heal a wounded brain is to have it observe itself. So I don't know how many of you saw the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? But one of the most interesting parts of that was visually they showed these neural nets which are formed in the brain when behaviors are done repeatedly and become habits. So it's like there's a repeated track that is taken every time a habit is repeated. Every time the behavior is not repeated in response to a stimulus, the neural nets are weakened, and with lack of use, they'll eventually dissolve. So I'm just wondering, can we observe different aspects of ourselves with kindness? This is kind of what we're being asked to do here to solve this. Compassionately observing ourselves. If we can, we have a chance of changing the craving brain and keeping the more rational frontal cortex in charge. So one way I work with people in my practice is to look at different aspects of the personality and how they play into a situation or problem that a person's having. And so in an emotional stress eating scenario, we might have a part that identified something as stressful. Excuse me. We may have a part that gives us reasons why we deserve something comforting or delicious after, we've had this stressful experience. And after eating it, we may have another part that feels guilty. Why did we do that? And it was something that was so rich. And then they have another part that might be beating us up because we got off our diet. And another part may reinforce feelings of low self-worth or hopelessness that things can never get better. So this is kind of a repeating cycle, and there are variations on it. Each part kind of has its place in holding the cycle in place. But each part, if you talk to it, would have a positive intention for the person. It's just the way they go about it is actually not helping. Then at other times, you may have a rebellious part that takes over and says, I don't care, I'm eating this. There's just no choice, that's what's going to happen, and no one is going to stop me. Okay, so to get an idea of how this works for you, I'd like to try another little exercise. I'd like you to close your eyes and envision your favorite dessert sitting in front of you. Okay, so now invite the part of you that is good at keeping you on a diet. You would invite that part to sit on your right shoulder. And the part that's self-indulgent, I'd like you to ask that part to sit on your left shoulder. And now notice what each part tells you about the dessert that's sitting in front of you. I'll give you a couple minutes to listen to these parts. So when you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes. So how many of you have already eaten the dessert? Okay. Yeah, so what about the part that is so good at keeping you on the diet? Was it very kind, or is it kind of a taskmaster?
It's very weak.
It was weak. Oh, so that it was not giving you real strong messages. Does anybody's part like that kind of seem like a military? No? Okay, good. Anybody want to share what their part told them?
The good part?
Yeah, the good part. Huh?
Well, mine's very negative. I mean, it said, okay, it's instant gratification. You're a product of every exception you've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there trying to talk myself out of my super frosted sugar cookie.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's telling me, you don't even like how the inside of your mouth feels when you put that much sugar in it later.
Mm-hmm.
The aftertaste is never as good as the current taste. And
Uh-huh.
7 cookies, can be enjoyed as much as 1 if I slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm telling myself all of these things. Now, I did notice the nonverbals of the room. You started with that person and everybody put on their right shoulder.
Uh-huh.
I noticed people's left shoulders, the majority of people's left shoulder was lower, where that heavier...
The indulgent part was?
I don't know if that's a coincidence.
Huh. Oh, how interesting.
I even noticed it as I was thinking the bad part. I was like, my shoulder was going down.
Huh.
Why
Huh.
heavier?
So that part had already gained weight. Yeah. Gee, that was quick. So anyone want to share anything about either of their parts? Message?
I feel like it's a very selfish thing. It doesn't help anybody but me, but I'm going to use her.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't do anything for anybody else, your family, anything around you. In fact, it works just the opposite. It makes everything else terribly negative.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're negative in the sight of your family. I mean, I'm negative. When I see obese people here, I'm obese. I'm sure they, so I think it's a very selfish thing. Obviously, it doesn't keep me from losing weight, but I was looking at that angle.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else like to share?
Well, my left side, I just sort of let myself enjoy it. I thought, this is kind of a long time to take to eat a brownie. And I thought, it was like, 2 bites and it's done.
Uh-huh.
2 minutes was a nice long time. But this side, it was almost like it could care less. And I think part of it is, a long few days, and that fatigue that comes in when you speak of it.
Uh-huh.
In paper,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I don't really care.
Uh-huh. Oh, good.
For this part.
Okay, so I just challenge you to, some of these parts have beliefs that either work well for you or don't work well for you, but showing compassion towards all the parts and just kind of asking them to moderate a little bit or not interrupt you, or sometimes you can ask them what they need if they're compelled to do something that doesn't really work for you. Well, maybe there's something else that you could substitute for that. So we tend to have parts that have opposite, they're polarized. They're like equally polarized, and that's one reason I wanted to do this with the shoulders, is that it's a good example of 2 parts that are kind of working in opposite ways. But really fighting a part doesn't work, because they can complicate things for you and not support your desires. So the trick is, and I think that's what the point is from this research about the craving brain, is that we kind of have to make peace with all these parts and show them compassion, but not let them take over. And that's the thing that happens. Is sometimes it's like we're a car. Who's driving the car? Well, some of these parts, if they're driving, the ride can be a little bit wild, and other parts are kind of rigid. And if they're driving, life could be not very much fun. You might get where you want it to go, but getting there wasn't really all that enjoyable. So I appreciate you trying that exercise. So I'd like to end now with teaching you another stress management tool that I use with a lot of people. It's called Attitudinal breathing, and it's kind of an introductory HeartMath technique. HeartMath has a lot of wonderful books about managing stress, and they had their most recent series of 4 books. They have Transforming Anger, Transforming Stress, Transforming Depression, and Transforming Anxiety. And I'd really recommend those books. I've had some very profound results with people using HeartMath to manage stress. Okay, so this is, yes?
What is the reference for that?
Transforming HeartMath. Yeah, it's one word, and it's heart and math, M-A-T-H.
And where does one find that?
Well, you can find them on Amazon.com or heartmath.org. Now, both of those places would be good. Okay, so attitudinal breathing. This is something that you can use when you want to shift your attitude or lower your stress level. And it's another breathing technique, and it involves breathing a positive feeling or attitude that you'd like to shift to into your heart with the in-breath and out through the solar plexus, which is in the diaphragm area. And so what I have people usually start doing is putting their one hand on the heart, like you're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and one on the solar plexus. And you can close your eyes. Once you get good at this, you can do this with your eyes open without the hands, and nobody is the wiser. So I just suggest that you breathe in happiness or energy or calmness, or that really great feeling you get when sunshine is very warm and comforting. So just pick from one of those and breathe one of them into the heart. And then breathing it out through the solar plexus grounds that feeling in the body. So when you feel complete, you can just gradually bring your attention back into the room. Take your time. So I was just wondering if you noticed a shift from that and what that was like, if anybody is willing to share. This is a good way to, if you start checking in with your mood or your stress level, it's a good way to shift it. And once you've done it for a while, you get better and better. It's like exercising the heart muscle, and that's a very powerful way to shift what's going on in the body. Researchers have found that the heart has an electrical field that's 40 to 60 times more powerful than that of the brain. And so what that means is that what's going on in the heart, everything in the body lines up to that. And they call that entrainment. So when you breathe in a positive feeling into the heart, it helps it calm down and become more, what they call, have more coherent heart rate variability. And when that happens, then it makes the brain waves more coherent and also has some better health benefits for you, like improved immune function, and it helps with blood pressure that's stress-induced. So, yes?
So would you recommend just using that technique when you're not stressed? I mean, just as
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, sure. And, if you just think, gee, I could be a little happier, I'm fine, but I could be a little happier, breathe in some happiness, that kind of thing. Or maybe you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. It's really empowering if you find out you can change that mood. Once you realize that you can be successful doing that, it's huge. And, I suggest people do this when they're driving. You've got your eyes open, and, it's not too taxing. It's just that's something that you can do to manage your stress on an ongoing basis. It's a little technique. So, are there any questions? Yes.
I have two questions for you. One is the techniques that you've just taught us. Are they in this book, The Craving Brain, or are they just things that you've picked up over the years?
These are the things that I use. Yeah, they're not in the Craving Brain.
If we want to remind ourselves, we just have to run to you.
That's right.
And then my other question was the research that you described to us on obsessive compulsive behavior with changing the brain. Was that a permanent fix, or did how long did they follow the people in this study? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that study I believe is in the Craving Brain, and I haven't read the study myself, so I don't know much more about it than what I said. But that's a great question. Really, I'm sorry I don't know the answer. Yeah. Yeah, there's a very exciting psychiatrist has done work with the brain. His name is Daniel Amen, and he has quite a few books out. He has a library of over 15,000 brain images. And in his books, he looks at what a normal brain is and then compares people who have different diagnoses or different problems. And some of the brain changes can, in his book he talks about different behavior that you can implement that will start changing this reaction in your brain. So that's an interesting resource if you're interested in finding out more about it. Yes?
Do you have a tool you can suggest? I call it spiraling behavior, where, okay, I went off my diet, I blew it, I might as well stay off for the rest of the day, and you just continually go down because it's self-defeating. But do you have a tool that you can use that just can stop that? I mean, it's just an insanity almost where you okay, I'm off. I blew it at breakfast. I might as well blow it at lunch. And, it's still at break time. Do you have something that, a tool to change that complete focus?
Well, there's a belief system under that, under that behavior that it's kind of an all or nothing belief that a lot of time dieters will have. It's either they're completely on the diet or it's, and it sounds like a part has kind of taken over that is given permission by that belief then. And okay, now we can just do what we want for the day because we've gotten off the diet. And so stopping that, following kind of what the Craving Brain was talking about, just stopping yourself and being quiet and sort of being with that and sort of exploring it, observing it, is that a belief that you want to really activate with your energy? It's been a habit pattern for a lot of people, and it's based on that belief. So it's you have to kind of challenge the belief and see. It's very common, I think, in people that diet to have the all or nothing idea. Yes.
Related to that, in these last couple of months, I've been thinking it stemmed from a conversation about how some of us, and you talk about obsessive compulsive. I don't think perhaps of us as being, or myself as being obsessive compulsive, except we were talking about how you want to finish something. Like you open a bag of cookies or chips or something. You don't want to just leave a little bit because you're too tidy to do that, so you just eat the whole thing. And, I've been thinking a lot about that when you talk about obsessive compulsive. I think, well, maybe that is part of the thing, to just want to, you want to have it clean and taken care of.
Well, a lot of us have, behavior that's in that direction. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have OCD. But really just challenge you to look at, okay, where did that belief come from? And, in the recommendations that I make on the handout, this whole thing of looking at the roots of your beliefs, it's huge. When you find out, whoa, my dad had this belief and now I have it, you had never really thought of where that belief came from. And then you have a choice. Okay, is that something that I want to continue doing, or could things be just as tidy if I closed up the bag and put it in the refrigerator? So it's where does the belief come from, and how is that? It's a little bit extreme. Well, how did it get that way, and does that really serve me? So that's a good question. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you. Yeah.